Welcome, my name is Martin Torrado, and today I'll be telling you a bit about modeling, UI, and design systems with GeneXus 18. Today it is evident the advantages of having good design and good UI is amazing, not only for web but also mobile applications. However, the development of these designs is very complex, not only for the design team that has to do it, but also for programmers that have to execute that design. So in GeneXus 18, what we have is a toolkit that makes your life easier and easier so that you can carry out these designs in a faster way. Why do we say this about GeneXus? Because we have tested it and we know it firsthand, because we have worked with real projects with this tool, which is what I wanted to show you a bit about today, a bit about those projects and how we develop them. So first, the football UI application that is available in stores both for Android and iOS. It is the official Uruguayan football application and it has more than 30,000 active users. On the screen, you can see some screenshots of the interface. As you can see, it's a polished, well-thought interface that tries to get the best from the user experience aspect. We have some other screens here to illustrate it. I would like you to take a look at the iconography, the fonts, how all the layout is structured so that you can have quality information depending on what is needed in the best possible way. So I wanted to show you a bit about this design for this application. If you want to know more about this, feel free to download it from the application stores, as I said, for iOS and Android. Another great example of quality design is the plant care sample. This is a sample developed by GeneXus. It's a plant e-commerce, basically. And it was basically developed for Android, iOS, and also Angular. As you can see, the design stands out and it's thought for being used with different sizes of devices, both mobile phones, tablets, and desktop computers. This is a great multi-experience, multi-platform example that also gives you the advantage that you can download it and try the new Angular generator. So again, feel free to download it from the public wiki of GeneXus. You have a QR code on the top right part of the screen with a direct link so that you can go to the wiki and download it and get a better look and feel for yourselves. And it uses a lot of new tools with GeneXus 18. So the question that we want to answer today is, how do we get the best out of GeneXus 18 to develop user experiences that are good quality? So I think that the answer to that question is based on being supported on these pillars, which will boost the power of development, also reusing and agility. Even though you have a number of tools that you get from GeneXus 18 in terms of development, design experiences, we can't cover them all in this talk, but I believe that these are the true fundamental pillars to bear in mind. So let's talk a bit about them so that you get a better idea of how it works. So input from design systems, stencils, user controls, and live editing. First and foremost, we have the input from tool, which is integrated in GeneXus. It allows us to use a Figma or Sketch file created by designers to integrate all that visual language, all that knowledge into our GeneXus KB, transforming it into objects, basically. So design systems or stencils, panels, and so on. So this design is represented like that in our KB. And this way you're going to save a lot of time implementing the UI because you're going to import all that knowledge in your KB and you're going to integrate much more in the development process of your applications, the design team, which means that you can iterate between development and design in a much more natural, less friction way. So why Sketch and Figma? Because they've been leading for years the market. They are the ones that designers prefer to develop UIs. And you can see a graph with the results of a poll that was conducted at the end of 2021. We as designers, what were the main platforms that they used when they were developing UI design? And as you can see, the two leading platforms by far are Figma and Sketch. So this is an example of the input from design tools. You can take a look. This is for a cinema application. You can see the different fonts and sizes. In the middle, you can visualize the layout that you will see so that you know what you're going to be importing in your KB. And also you have a specific panel. And on the right, you have how that panel is made up. So you see that for all the objects as you selected, all the different objects that will be imported in the KB. As we said, those Sketch and Figma objects will generate in your KB a number of objects, and one of them is the design system. So what is a design system object? It is basically the evolution of what we used to call the theme object. It seeks to generate more abstraction so that you can create the design for your applications and reuse much more. It uses a very similar structure to CSS, which also means that you have a more flowing interaction with the design team because you have a common language to work with. So how do we create these design systems in GeneXus? Well, I think that there are three ways to do so. First is that you can create a design from scratch. From the new object dialog in the IDE, you can create a design system and start working with that from scratch. The second option is you can import a design system that has already been created in your KB and extend it. And the third option, as I was saying, is that you can use the input from, whether it's Figma or Sketch, you're going to create a design system. And from there, you can also modify it and extend it. I didn't want to miss this chance to tell you a bit more about how GeneXus for quite a while has been working on a specific design system to use it as a visual language for all the products and also as a by default design system for new KBs created in GeneXus 18. This will substantially improve the design by default for your GeneXus applications, and on the screen you can see a bit about the default design. The design system's name is Unanimo and it has some advantages, for example that it's distributed as a module, which means that it's maintained through the module manager of GeneXus, which means that you can make updates and manage your versions independently from the GeneXus version that you're using. Unanimo is extensible, so you can import it in your own design systems and extend it as much as you want. If you want to know more about both Unanimo and Total Experience with GeneXus 18, I would recommend you to take a look at these talks. That will be very convenient. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to talk about is user controls. As you begin to polish the design of your application, you may need to have to extend behavior with some control that is not given by default by GeneXus in its toolkit. This kind of extensibility is possible thanks to the user control object. And the advantage is that you can work it in the GeneXus KB because it has the editor inside the IDE. It also is portable, so it means that you can import it and export it in your different KBs to use that control. And we have plenty of examples. In this PPT on the right you can see a card that is basically HTML, but today I wanted to show you two controls that we've been working on for a project with the Angular generator. These controls, as I said, came from the need to have specifically internal design, but it shows the full power of user controls. On the left, you can see a drop-down menu with images, and on the right, you can see a date picker with a range selection, and both look really nice. Both developed with user controls for Angular. Even though in GeneXus you do have a date picker, the specific need for that project told us that it needed to look like this, that it needed to be able to select ranges, and so we decided to opt for this very powerful tool called user controls. Now let's talk a bit about stencils. As I said, it's another fundamental pillar for the design of our applications. Stencils, what they do is they encapsulate design so that they can reuse it in different parts of your application. Something important about this is that stencils have no code associated to them. We're going to see an example like the one on the screen, which shows information about speakers at an event. You can see in each of these screens the speakers of this event, so encapsulating that information in a stencil is good for many reasons. First, because you design just once and you use the stencil throughout the different panels without having to repeat yourselves with design, and therefore you're saving a lot of time. Another important thing is that if maybe in the future people from the design team tell you that they're changing something in the way that they are showing speakers, if you just modify one stencil, it would be impacting all the screens that you're using, so it makes it very agile. And finally, when a KB is componentized, it is easier to maintain and understand. So back to the football UI application, let me show you an example of how we used stencils for that application. Because the scores for matches is something that always appear throughout the application. You can encapsulate that design in a stencil, and that is really useful and it makes it really easy. Football UI uses more than 50 stencils with different purposes, and this is one of them because, as I said, the results of different matches are shown in different ways throughout the application. So with GeneXus 18, we also introduced this new functionality, this new feature for stencils, which is called Stencils with slots. So how did that happen? Following the previous example, I was telling you that the results of matches are shown in the same way throughout the application, but if you keep searching in the application, you will see some screens where the design will not be exactly the same. Even though it shows the result, it adds some extra components. So sometimes in the application, for example, when a match is happening, where you want to add information of different sorts to the design of the results that you were seeing. On the left, you can see that you have the time that is showing you how much has been played in that match in particular. And on the right, you can see, for example, the different events in the match. For example, yellow cards or goals or changes. So as in this case, we would think that the original stencil doesn't work anymore and you should make some variations so that you can show this dynamic information. And the answer to that is that after GeneXus 18, you can use the stencils with slots, which will help you to show this fixed design framework with dynamic content inside. So you just modify the stencil that you had previously designed and you add a slot for variable content. In this case, you can see how we add a table with the is slot equals true property, and in the different panels that you're using now, you can add to that table the content that you want. For example, the grid with the different yellow cards and goals, or the time with the clock. It's the same design framework, but in the slot property table, you can add dynamic information. This means that stencils with slots will increase even more the power to reuse and make developing more agile. And last, we have live editing, that even though it is not a new tool, it may sound familiar because it is a key pillar in the development of user interfaces with good quality. For those of you that don't know this tool, live editing is, as I was saying, a design tool to work live in our applications. You can see in real time all the modifications that you are making to your panels, and it gives you really good quality results in much less time. If you've used it, you know the full power that this can add. So for those of you that haven't tried it, do please give it a try, because it will significantly reduce the time and stress that you have to go through when you're developing UIs. At least personally, I think this is one of the key pillars and that we have to get really good quality results. Now I'd like to work on a quick demo to show you some of the concepts that we saw in this presentation. And the idea of this demo is to create that interface that shows you the lineup of players in the field. So let's see how we can do that with GeneXus. So we start with an empty KB, and when you create that, you get this design system that it's going to extend from Unanimo. So you have your empty KB to start working. Also, for this demo, we're going to have imported some assets, such as images of a football pitch, so that you can set up your design. So with these resources, you can start working. First thing you do is you create a panel. You call it panel lineup. You save changes. You set it as main program because it's going to be running, and you select startup object. Now you're going to start working on design. For that, you go to the toolbox, you drag a table to the layout, which is going to contain all the image of the football pitch in the background, so that then you can put the players on top of it. Let's call it table field as a name. And the background image is going to be that asset that I mentioned, which is the field. Now we go to the main table, and row style should be 100% so that you see the field full on the phone screen. You save changes, you activate live editing, one of the pillars that we mentioned in the talk today, and we run the application. As you can see the panel with the table and the image in the background, but we're going to add the live inspector, which is something that, because there's something that I don't quite like, which is these margins that you have in the top and bottom part of the screen. So we can see that it's the main table, the one that has those margins, and it's using this class that is called table detail. We're going to copy that class then, and we're going to modify that in your design system. So we're going to it's going to be padding top, 0 pixels. You can see with this live editing in real time how that layout changes. And the same thing for padding bottom, 0 pixels as well. So there you go, you have the football field ready to start putting your players on it. And that's what we're going to do now. We're going to go back to the lineup panel. And we're going to start to show the location of our goalkeeper. So we need a player. For that we go to variables. We're going to declare the variables which are going to be player image, which is type image, and player name, which is bar chart. Then we're going to drag from the toolbox grid to our football field, and we're going to assign those variables that we've just created. Let's design it a little bit. Let's get these details, correctly on the grid. We want the image of the football player and the name to appear, the image on top and the name below, so that they will appear like that on the screen. You create the tables, you put everything in the right place. You go here to rename, and you rename it as a single player layout because it's going to be just the role keeper. And we give it some size aspects to the different rows. What we have to do now is we need to create the event grid.load, which is going to load the information of that player. So basically, in the end, we want to have a 4-4-2 lineup, 4 defenses, 4 midfielders, and 2 strikers. So we create the grid layout that we've just chosen, which has only 1 player, and we assign it an image and a name. We use the load command, and now we can run the application. As we can see here, we have our player on the screen, but the visuals are not quite what I wanted, so we're going to work on that. So let's go here to the player's name and image, and let's center it horizontally in the middle. Now it looks better already. I also, with the table that contains these variables, now I go here and I modify the image. I don't like it that it's a square, so let's make it round. We create an image player class for that purpose, and we go back to the design system to give it the properties that we want, okay? One of the things that we want to do here is when you don't have, for some reason, the player's image, you want to have an image that makes that place not to be empty. So we want to have a placeholder image. So we write GX placeholder image, and we assign the image of your assets from your KB. So when the application cannot find an image to assign to a certain player, it's going to assign it that placeholder. Now let's go to the table that contains the player's image, and it's going to be a 50 dip size. And in the class here, we're going to say that the border radius is going to be half, so 25 pixels, and we create that effect of a round image. Now we're going to work on the player's name. Let's change the class from attribute to attribute player's name. We see how it already changes the design in the application. We assign a white color so that contrast is better. And we give it a top margin of 5 pixels so that it's separated a bit from the player's image. At the same time, we can reduce font size so that when we have more players on the field, it is not too crowded and you can read it better. And there you have the design that you want for a player in the field. Now what we want to do here is to separate the image from the top margin. So we're going to add a custom class to the grid, and we're going to have a margin top of 15 pixels. So now, yes, we have the design that we wanted for the player. The horizontal line separator should be false so that it doesn't show and it doesn't contaminate my design. And we save changes. So now what we have to do is to add more players, and adding more players means repeating the design, because basically you've created the design to show a player. So what should we do in this case? We should, well, this is the ideal case to say that our way to show the player is going to be a wrap of a stencil. So you right click, wrap as new stencil, you assign it a name that it should be a player in this case, for instance, and you encapsulated your design so that you can show a player in a stencil. So now every single time that you want to use that, you can reference that as a stencil. We're going to create, as I said, a new item layout so that you can show, for example, a line of 2 players. So we go to Tools, and we drag the tool stencil so that you can add a new player on the field. See how easy it is now to add players. You have an item layout to show 2 players. And because we wanted to have a lineup that was a 4-4-2, we're also going to create an item layout for 4 players. So we follow the same steps. We drag the stencil until we have a line of 4. And you have the layouts done, which is much easier than repeating the design every single time. Now what we see is that each player is going to repeat the image and name variables, so you need to create independent variables to show each player, and that's what we're doing now. So we're creating different player images, 1, 2, 3, the same thing for names. And now in the layout, we can change the different name variables so that each of them is an independent player, and you can load that from the element independently. The same thing for the 2-player layout. So now we go to the events in your panel, and you're going to load all the different players. So here is the code, which is ready because it's basically repeating ourselves. We're going to select the item layout for 4 players, for 4 defenses. We're going to add the different images and names, the same thing for the middle field and the same thing for strikers, and then you run the application. And as you can see here on the screen, you have all the lineup ready with all the images and the different designs for texts. The images are rounded, everything is centered in just a few minutes, just by using design systems and using live editing and stencils. And I also want you to take a look at the fact that, for example, player number 22 in the defense, but because we had assigned a placeholder class, it has taken that image to use it instead, and the design looks robust and complete. So with GeneXus 18, you have all the tools available to create top quality user experiences and interfaces and take your design to the next level. As I was saying at the beginning of the talk, creating applications with GeneXus has never been faster, more powerful, never easier, and as we like to say, we are future-proof. So I would like to invite you to download the last version, GeneXus 18, and reach these conclusions by yourselves in terms of all the advantages that you'll have for your businesses. Thank you so much.